Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. In this video, we're going to tackle a critical subject, which is what should you bring with you to the hospital? And we're going to talk about this in the context of bringing a hospital bug out bag. The 10 items that I would recommend you bring, and this is informed by both my experience as a nurse and as a patient. Let's get started. So friends, the point for this video that I really wanted to drive home for you is that the grab and go mentality, the preparedness mentality extends to even those circumstances which we really didn't want to experience. And in the case of going to the hospital, most people aren't really excited about this unless you're going through an elective procedure that's going to change your life for the positive. But my goal for this video is to get you better prepared so that way you have one less thing to think about if you need to go to the hospital. This could be for a routine procedure. This could be for the birth of your child if you're having a hospital birth. This could also be for an emergency room trip if you have, for instance, an issue that has come up that you can't manage at home and you need to go to a higher echelon of care. We're going to get you squared away so that way you have the things in your bag ready to go to make it easier for you to get to the hospital and not have to worry. So the first area of preparedness that you really need to be squared away with is your critical documents. Now, critical documents we think of course, driver's license, government issued IDs. People know about this, but have you considered making a copy of these in the hard copy form? A copy of your driver's license. If a passport is something that you'd like to have, making a copy of that. Also, your insurance cards and pertinent information related to that. Another thing to have a copy of in the hard copy form is your medical history. What surgeries and interventions have you had previously? What are your maintenance medications, if any, that you're on? What important supplements are you on? And don't forget those, because a lot of those supplements nowadays are being considered as part of a well-integrated medical management regime. But also, some pharmacists and physicians want to know about your supplements in case they might have interactions with interventions or with pharmaceuticals that they would give. Another thing to consider having is a power of attorney. Now, this needs to be ahead of time, something that you've considered who would make decisions for you in case that you could not make them for yourself, and what are your wishes in case you find yourself in need of life-supportive treatments. These aren't necessarily things we'd like to think of. They're not necessarily positive and happy things, but I would much rather come at them from a position of knowing ahead of time and not a rushed last-minute decision. So have those conversations ahead of time and having them documented appropriately is going to be very important for you, because they're going to ask this anyway upon admission and check-in. Number 2, let's talk medication and equipment. If you are on maintenance medications, having those medications in a gallon-sized Ziploc bag or whatever size Ziploc bag you need to bring, having those medications in their original bottles from the pharmacy, that's going to be helpful for you. And if you can, possibly bring 3 to 5 days of your maintenance medications with you, or just put the bottles all together in that bag, that's going to be helpful for you, because you may find that sometimes the hospital may not have the exact type of maintenance medication that you need, particularly if you are a chronic pain patient or you're a patient on a very specialized form of medication that's not very common or that is prone to disruption in availability due to our supply chain weaknesses. Number 3, and one that is very near and dear to my heart as a former labor and delivery nurse, is comfortable clothing. Now, comfortable clothing is something that perhaps is not the forefront on your mind of I should pack this, but let me assure you, living your existence in a very weakened form in the hospital, whether it's convalescing from surgery or whatever the case may be, if you are not comfortable and if you're living that day to day in a gown, that's going to suck. So plan to pack pajamas, comfortable clothes, and very importantly, a robe. If you don't have a nice, comfortable robe that keeps you warm and that's easy to tie on yourself, please consider getting that, because you do not want to be stuck all day in clothes that are not comfortable for you and that are not easy to get in and out of, particularly if you need to go to the bathroom. Another thing many people neglect to pack is flip-flops or footwear that you can wear easily in the shower that has grip and tread on it. And why would I advocate for this? Because friends, lots of people go to the hospital, and due to staffing issues and kind of spotty training of those staff and housekeeping, sometimes those floors in the bathroom are just not as clean as you wish they'd be. Think about a hotel, right? And if you, for instance, have ever taken a shower barefooted in a place and contracted athlete's foot or some other type of fungal nasty in one of those showers, it's really not a battle that you want to fight, particularly one if you're convalescing from a hospital procedure or something like that. So packing flip-flops, shoes that have grip, that are easy for you to get in and out of, that's a really valuable thing. So a lot of people you'll see will pack slippers or some sort of gripping sockies, little grip sockies, and those are fine. But in my opinion, you really want to be able to protect your feet as well going to shower and use the bathroom. Another clothing item to consider is a beanie or some type of cap, a snug cap that will keep you warm that you can pull down over your head. One of my big pet peeves, particularly in labor and delivery, is the penchant of the hospital to keep rooms freezing cold. And oftentimes this is because, we can't find maintenance staff to fix the issue. We're sorry the room is cold, but there's nothing we can do. Or it's so hot in there for our staff during procedures because of all the lights. Listen, as a nurse, you shouldn't be caring about your physical comfort as a healthcare provider. The patient is the one that's there and that needs support. So sorry, fellow nurses and healthcare providers, don't care whether or not you're cold or hot. The patient's perspective is what matters. But friends, if you are going into the hospital as a patient, you have to count on the fact that serial incompetence is what you are likely to encounter at any given time, including with people who would be trying to keep your room cold or warm, depending on what your needs may be. Having warm clothing is something very important to consider, because being cold and convalescing, and also for moms postpartum, oftentimes because blood loss and other hormonal shifts, being cold is something they experience. Pack warm, comfortable clothing like a little beanie, like a warm robe that you can snug around you to keep you warm. Another fact of the matter, having experienced this myself in the hospital, they do not have blankets to keep you warm. They have these little tiny transport blankets that come in and off of emergency equipment, or you'll ask, for instance, if you're cold, for them to bring you blankets, and maybe they'll be warm out of the warmer for a little bit, but they're not insulatory. So having a warm blanket to take with you of some sort can really help, particularly if you're prone to coldness or if you're anticipating convalescing from a procedure. Number 4 is essential electronics and chargers. Oh, friends, the electrical departments and the electrical unions may not like me for this, but if you are someone who has a lot of electronics with you, or you need, for instance, to take them with you for whatever reason, you may find yourself fighting for outlets in that room. And whether or not you bring a strip charger or a surge protector, that may or may not be frowned upon in the hospital. So you may need to consider, as an addition to your charging cables and to your portable boxes, something like a block, an OtterBox block, or something that will hold the charge that you can plug your USB related charging cables into, because you may not have the accessibility of outlets that you wish you had. Number 5 is snacks and hydration. So of course, this is going to be dependent. If, for instance, you're NPO, you're not permitted to have anything by mouth, which is in some cases unnecessary, particularly when it comes to laboring women. But if you are in a position where it is acceptable for you to have snacks by mouth or to have water, etc., then consider bringing your favorite tumbler, a large tumbler, something like a Yeti or the Stanley cups, something that's going to keep you topped off and that is easily accessible for you. And also another point too, one of the reasons why I like tumblers that have an easy hand grip to them is because oftentimes if you are cold and if you're convalescing, there may be drugs in your system, and it may not be easy for you to make that C grip hold on, for instance, like a Yeti cup, something that doesn't have an actual gripping handle on it. So make sure that it's easy for you to access and that it's large enough so that once it's topped off, it will last you several hours. A point about food. Hippocrates said it himself, let thy medicine be thy food. Unfortunately, the dietary department of a hospital has not gotten that in like 95% of the cases at hospitals. The food is abysmal, it's atrocious, and I, as a nurse, having served it to patients, felt bad bringing it into the room, fully knowing that sausage and egg and cheese is the last thing that patients need when they want to convalesce well, and that fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh and wholesome foods, are the best way to support convalescence and protein synthesis in the body. So if you know this ahead of time and you have certain foods that you like that are fresh, plan on having those available, whether it's having a cooler or having someone bring it in, or considering delivery to the hospital if that's an option for you. But definitely don't plan on having wholesome food delivered to you, because most of the time it's just, I'm sorry, it's going to be gross. So plan on having food brought with you, brought to you, or having some other continuum of dietary assistance if that's something you need to consider. Number 5 is communication and note taking. This is a small but very useful useful thing. Have a little notepad with you with a writing utensil that is easy for you to grip, kept at your bedside table, so that way you can quickly take notes if there's a question that you have, because your doctor or your nurse practitioner, your advanced healthcare provider, they may only be making rounds once a day and certainly not on the weekends. So rather than get into the shocked moment of, okay, they're here and now I can't remember what my questions were for my healthcare provider, have a note-taking capability outside of your phone, because especially if you have drugs in your system, trying to unlock the phone and how do I find it, it may not be easy for you. And certainly it may not be as easy as it now is for you. Have a little notepad with you so that way you can jot that down on your bedside table just quickly. And speaking of clear communication, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure and share this with one person who might also be similarly benefit from it. And if you aren't subscribed to the channel and you're enjoying the content, please click that little subscribe button and the bell for all the Patriot Nurse content that comes out. That way you'll be kept up to date on what is happening and you won't miss a video. Clear communication. Oh, I can make a video about this in and of itself, but try and make a point of clear and concise bullet point what your question is and what the pertinent background is in like 30 seconds and less. When you're doing an introduction to a healthcare provider, oftentimes they're on a time crunch, which it is what it is. We're in a system that has way too much pull on it and not enough give. There are not enough healthcare providers to go around. So making sure that you have those bulleted points ready to go when your healthcare provider comes in the room, it allows you to be more with it. It also allows you to get more out of that limited time with your healthcare provider. Number 7 is emotional support and well-being. This could be anything from your favorite stuffed animal, particularly if you have kids, or if you don't have kids and you just like your stuffed animals. Another thing to consider is an essential oil diffuser. Now again, the electrical department may hate me for this, but essential oils and therapeutic diffusers in a room are very helpful for not only supporting the emotional well-being of the patient, because the limbic system, which is the emotional center of the brain, the fast track into that is through the olfactory nerve. That is the smell. So particularly if you have someone who's convalescing and they're in pain from the surgery, having a therapeutic essential oil such as lavender or such as ylang ylang or even geranium or lemon, these are common essential oils that have been used to support emotional well-being and in some cases allow patients with that supported emotion to have a decreased perception of pain. So consider this as part of the protocol. And also, I'll just straight up tell you, nurses and healthcare providers are more likely to go into your room if it smells good. And every single time I have been in the hospital or had a family member in the hospital, plugged my essential oil diffuser in there, the healthcare providers love coming into the room because it smells good. And so again, I know I get pushback from that, but here's the thing. If you are the patient in that room, it is incumbent upon you to take every emotional and psychological advantage that you can, and that's in your own best interest. So provided that nobody gives you pushback, use that essential oil diffuser with gusto. Another thing to consider in your emotional well-being is, do you have, for instance, religious texts or scriptures that are important to you? Perhaps even printing those out to tape on the wall as a visual point and a reminder to have with you. Another thing you consider is having a playlist on your phone of music that will support you. Oftentimes women in labor will utilize this, but also it's important for convalescence because the spiritual component is very necessary to not only acknowledge, but also to really feed in the healing process. So whether it's your favorite hymns or your favorite supportive instrumental music, consider having this in part of your convalescence and in your room if you are going to the hospital. Another part of the emotional support that people may not be thinking about is, how are you going to support your rest? In the hospital, if you are getting poked and prodded and woken up every 4 hours to 6 hours, sleep is going to be at a premium. And one of the things that we can do to ensure that we're getting the maximum amount of sleep is to safeguard around common disruptions for sleep. So plan to bring an eye mask to block out light. Also plan to bring earplugs as well. And my favorite earplugs, I'll put a link in the description box below. They're called Quais, and they are the highest rated decibel foam earplug inserts that I have found. I love them. I buy them in bulk and I put them in all of my bags that leave the house regularly. Number 8 is your advocate and preparing your advocate. So whether this is your spouse, if you're going into the hospital for a birth, or this is a family member that's coming with you, taking you to the emergency room, taking you to the hospital for a procedure, make sure the person who is bringing you or who's going to be staying with you, make sure that they're prepared as to what to look for. And what do I mean what to look for? Are the nursing staff making rounds as they're supposed to? Are you getting medications on time? And when I say on time, within a 15 to 20 minute window of when you are planned to have a medication dosage. If you're not getting your medication within that 15 to 20 minute window as planned, you need to be ringing that bell and the call light and asking where that medication is. And I know I may get pushback from some nurses who say, we can't be having patients, ring the call light, whatever. Listen, it's your job to deliver medications on time as a nurse. And you know that you have your window between 15 to 20 minutes before and after. If you can't make it within that window, then you need to either let your nurse manager know, you need to get more staff, or you need to stop making excuses and use your time better. So that's the thing. I'm an old school nurse, not about making excuses, particularly when it comes to pain medicine. Your patients depend upon that. And if you can't execute upon that, then you need to find some solutions, or at least let your patient know what's going on, that you're having issues delivering things on time, and that you're going to do your best. If you're open as a nurse and communicating with your patients, much less likely to have trouble. But the issue is nurses are burnout, nurses are overworked, and nurses are in some cases having their own interpersonal drama or drama at home, causing them to not really be available emotionally or intellectually or from an energy standpoint to do their jobs well on the unit. And oftentimes they're not getting the support they need from staffing. So if you are bringing an advocate in for you, make sure that you know ahead of time. It's not necessarily that people are malicious or that staff are malicious and not being able to execute upon the promises they've made you. It's they may get overwhelmed. They may have critical issues, particularly in the emergency room. They may have critical issues next door where you have someone who's come in from a trauma who's hemorrhaging and they just can't get to you at that moment. But your advocate should be regularly checking in a kind and respectful way, saying, hey, I know that 9 o'clock is when we were told we would get meds. It's 9:15 right now. I'm checking in on this because I know that we're due, and I just want to make an assessment here as to what's going on. So being kind and being helpful is obviously part of this, not being entitled or arrogant, but your advocate does need to know that it is their job to check in if things are not being executed as promised, and it's your advocate's job to kindly and respectfully dialogue and interface with staff and healthcare providers, particularly if you are under the influence of recovering drugs, or if you're not capable of doing that yourself. Bring an advocate with you to the hospital. You must have someone there with you who can stay with you if at all possible. If you are watching this as a support person of a family member who's going in, please do not leave your family members alone. Even if you have to tag team with others and go in for shifts, if at all possible, please don't leave your family members alone. Number 9 is an emergency plan and the miscellaneous items. Let's talk about emergency plans. Sometimes when you go into the hospital, you go there for emergent care and you end up encountering a worst case scenario than what you would have thought previously. For example, you may run into a situation where you go, for instance, to the emergency room and they don't have staff enough to care for you, or you end up waiting for quite a long time, which is becoming the norm. And I don't see that getting better anytime soon, particularly when we have so many people coming into the United States from other countries illegally who are pulling heavily on the healthcare system to the detriment of the legal citizens here. When you consider what happens going into a hospital, you are effectively surrendering your sovereignty to a degree. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get it back, but when you go into the hospital and admitting yourself, you do end up effectively having to play their game in order to get discharged. However, I want you to understand a few things. You absolutely have the right, you have the authority to terminate any employee involved in your care, to terminate any plan of care at any time according to your will. You do not, by virtue of being a patient in the hospital, suddenly surrender all rights to make decisions for yourself. If anything, you should have a contingency plan of, if I can't get listened to, if someone is not treating me well, what am I going to do according to how severe it is? So for instance, let's give this example. Let's say you get admitted to the hospital, you're recovering, and then you get transferred to go up to the floor for your convalescence. And let's say, for instance, the nurse who is taking care of you is more than once being short, being unkind, and being effectively not professional with you. What then are you going to do? You have the option to call the charge nurse and speak to the charge nurse and say, I'm not satisfied with the care that I'm given from this person because of X, Y, and Z times, which, by the way, you've noted and documented on your little note-taking pad that we've previously mentioned. By talking to the nurse manager and saying, I'd like another nurse because I'm not satisfied with the level of care that I'm getting from this person, that allows you to mitigate and manage a circumstance and keep it from getting worse to, for instance, patient neglect or even patient abuse. If, for instance, you're on the floor and the nurse manager, after talking to them, says, you know what, sorry, we'll do our best, and then nothing happens, then you've got to figure out, okay, well, what else am I going to do? So you have the ability to get involved hospital administration, but also the bioethics committee of the hospital. If you are unable to get satisfactory treatment from the hospital, you have the ability to escalate the grievance to a higher echelon of care. If you have not been able to resolve these issues, you have the ability to leave the hospital against medical advice AMA. But be aware, if you do choose to leave the hospital AMA, there may be repercussions from an insurance reimbursement standpoint for the hospital. In some cases, if you leave the hospital AMA against medical advice, you may be left paying the entirety of your bill without insurance. So be aware of the insurance implications of that. But from a secondary standpoint, if you don't have insurance going to the hospital, you can always call the hospital billing department ahead of time if this is a planned procedure. Or, for instance, if you go to the hospital and you do not have health insurance, you can speak to the hospital billing department, and oftentimes they will settle for you significantly lower than the billed price if you pay in cash. And also, they can deep discount things as much as 70 to 90% if you pay lump sum cash payment ahead of time. And you can also talk to an accountant about this, but in many cases, these payments are deductible from your taxes. That doesn't make them free, obviously, but there are ways to make it less burdensome for you. But all in all, you need a plan to escalate your grievances if you're not able to get good care in the hospital, and to find a way to not only get things fixed if your healthcare providers are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, but also you need to know that you can indeed get up and leave. You may be stuck paying the bill, but there is nothing saying that you are a prisoner in the hospital system. As a final point here for the emergency plan, have an index card, if you have the chance ahead of time, prepared for you with your emergency contacts, and have that index card, 3x5 index card, have that taped either to your bedside table or to your bedside tray or someplace that is visible in your hospital room. This helps you. This also helps your healthcare providers should there need to be an emergency contact. It is helpful to have that information right there ahead of time. Number 10, the grab and go mentality. This last bit is really the mentality that you take with you to the hospital. The mentality and the attitude that you take with you has a great deal of influence upon your outcomes overall. More than just the physical, it's the mental, the emotional, the spiritual aspects that you take with you. So packing light, of course, is something that we advocate in preparing for your bag, to take your bag, but also what mentality and what mindset are you taking with yourself to the hospital? And it can be, for instance, very intimidating. It can be a very fearful and scary time. But in my opinion, if you are informed by your faith and you're also combating that fear on a spiritual level and just speaking truth to yourself, that's going to help you greatly. And knowing, of course, particularly if you're a believer, knowing, of course, that the Lord is with us and that He's promised never to forsake us, and that He is with us wherever we go, even in the hospital room, even in the transport, even in the birthing room, the Lord is with us. And we can hold on to that with surety as a firm foundation. And so speaking that truth to yourself, reciting these truths to yourself, and also taking hold of that part of you that wants to be fearful, the fearfulness is expelled with faith and with love. So holding on to love, holding on to faith, and expelling the fearful. That is what we take with us. In addition to the lightweight bag, we take the mentality, the mindset, and the attitude of love and of faith and of hope with us wherever we go. So friends, those are the 10 things that I would recommend you bring to the hospital. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but it is a helpful list just to springboard your own preparedness for those days when, for instance, if you have a family member going in or you're planning a birth in the hospital, hopefully this video has helped you be able to be more prepared for that day. I hope the video was helpful for y'all. If you did enjoy it, please share this video with one person who you know might similarly be benefited from it. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. You can also check out the website, thepatriotnurse.com, if you'd like to learn from me how to be more prepared for your family's health needs at home. We have 2 options for you to train with. One is a 4-hour course, and that's the Foundations of Medical Preparedness. We also have the Herbal Preparedness course, which is a great way to utilize the plants around you as part of a well-rounded, holistic preparedness mentality. If you're headed to the hospital for a routine procedure, may you have a beautiful, perfect, smooth recovery convalescence. May the Lord bless and keep you all wherever you go. I hope the video was helpful for y'all. Have a very, very blessed day. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.